Want to know the easiest way to make your BDSM scenes feel 10 times more intense without any extra effort? It's not about hitting harder, using fancier toys, or pushing limits. It's about how you use sensation. And chances are you're missing some of the simplest tricks that could take it from meh to mind-blowing. I'm Alessandra from Domsub Living, and I've got 5 game-changing tips for you. Let's get into it. Welcome to the Domsub Living podcast. Before we talk about my biggest tips, if you want to see what a real sensation play scene looks like step by step, go to domsubliving.com/scene. I've put together an actual real life scene that you can read and use as inspiration for your own play. So again, you can grab it for free at domsubliving.com/scene. I'll put a link for it in the description too. But like I said, I'm sharing 5 game-changing sensation play tips today that will completely change the way you think about touch, tease, and anticipation. And whether you're a dominant wanting to take control in a new way or a submissive craving more intense experiences, these tips will help you get there. And make sure you watch until the end because I'm sharing a trick that completely changed the way I experience sensation play, and it doesn't even require a single toy. Before we dive into the tips, let's just quickly talk about what sensation play actually is, because a lot of people misunderstand it. But sensation play, it's a form of kinky play that focuses on stimulating the senses rather than focusing on pain and control and impact. There can be pain, and there probably will be pain if you're doing BDSM, but that's not our focus here. It's about exploring different textures, temperatures, pressures, and even sound to really just heighten the physical and psychological pleasure or pain. It's not just about what you feel, but how you feel it. But let's go over some common myths and misconceptions that people have around sensation play. Some people think that sensation play is only for submissives who maybe can't handle pain or that it's just light BDSM, but that's not true at all. Even hardcore masochists and sadists like me and my dom, we can use sensation play to enhance a scene. In fact, there's only so far you can go with impact play in BDSM, so sensation play, it's just a nice layer to add on when you kind of have maxed out all you can do. And the other nice thing about it is you don't need expensive toys or different tools. Some of the best sensation play techniques require nothing but your hands and just a little creativity. So why does sensation play work in BDSM? Well, our skin is packed with nerve endings, and our brains process touch in incredibly complex ways. That's why something as simple as a feather tracing down your spine can just really send shivers through your whole body. But so now that we know what sensation play is, let's get into the 5 tips that will take it from nice to unforgettable. So my first tip is probably the biggest overlooked hack, and that is to use contrasting sensations. That will really just give you the maximum impact. Because the biggest mistake I see people make with sensation play is just using one type of stimulation. Our bodies can get used to sensations so fast, so that means that the same touch over and over just stops feeling intense. So the secret really here is contrast. So how you can create contrast in sensation play, there's actually a few ways. So one of them is with hot and cold temperatures. So you can run an ice cube over the skin and then immediately follow that with warm breath or a different heated object. And then another contrast is soft and sharp things. So you could use something like a silk scarf to just really gently caress the body, and then contrast that with something like a Wartenberg wheel or just light scratching. And then you can contrast with light and firm. So you can tease with the lightest fingertip touch and then suddenly grip the skin with a ton of pressure. And so just going back between light and firm. And one of my dom's favorite ways to do this is with a flogger. So oftentimes I'll have a blindfold on, and that's a great way to experience these different contrasting sensations because then you don't know what's going on. But he'll use the tail ends of a flogger to just kind of caress over my body, and it just kind of almost tickles me even. And then when my body has kind of had enough of that, then I start kind of bracing for more, and then he'll switch to using it for impact play. And again, he'll go back and forth, and it's kind of like a Russian roulette where I never know which one's coming next. But the contrast can just be so intense. And a lot of times I will just be so completely off guard that when he does use it as impact, I will just completely jump. So it's not about what you use though, but how you mix these sensations. So think about what sensations you can contrast in your next scene. So even if it's something as alternating light touches and that sudden firm grip, just contrasting back and forth like that can make a huge difference. So that was my first tip, to use contrasting sensations. And then my second tip is to slow down, because anticipation is everything. And the reason why this works so well is because most of us rush through sensation play because we're focused on what's next. But that's actually killing the intensity, because our brains crave anticipation. And the longer you tease, the more intense that final sensation becomes. So, some ways to build anticipation in sensation play is just to kind of think about moving at like a half speed. So when you're touching your partner, just really notice how their body reacts. Another thing you can do is pausing before impact. So when you're using an implement, let them feel that suspense. If you're doing a spanking, instead of going one after the other, just pause in a minute and see how they'll flinch because they know it's coming. But just building that anticipation can go a long way. Another way you can do it is to describe what's coming next, but delay it. And that way their mind is doing the work. But I know when I first started exploring this lifestyle, I used to think I wanted everything now, now, now. But the first time my Dom really slowed things down, I just realized how powerful patience is. I'm a huge masochist, so I'm used to the hard impact. That's what I really want, is that, the hard spankings and the paddling. But the first time he used the Wartenberg wheel over my skin, it was agony, because he went incredibly slow and I was just writhing in torture. It was just agonizing. And if he would have went faster with it, it just wouldn't have had that effect. So think about your last scene. Were you rushing through it? And what would happen if you just paused and let that anticipation build? So that was my second tip, to slow down and build anticipation. And then my third tip is to use everyday items for sensory play. So you don't need fancy toys. People think they need expensive tools for sensation play, but honestly, some of the best sensations come from stuff you already have at home. And if you need ideas, here are some creative everyday sensation play tools to get you started. So one you might have heard of before is using a hairbrush, because you have the soft bristles on one side that you can use for teasing, and then you can turn it over and you can use that harder side for impact, like a paddle. So that's a really great tool for just using those contrasting sensations. And then another one I really like is using frozen grapes. So just take some grapes, put them in the freezer. Because a lot of times people think of using ice cubes, but frozen grapes are really fun to use because you can use them for temperature play, putting them on the skin, but then you can feed them to your partner. So you get that taste sensation too. Because a lot of times we forget that taste is such a big sensation and it's really hard to explore in a BDSM scene. So using the frozen grapes as, the cold on the body and then feeding them to your partner can be a lot of fun. And then another inexpensive tool, or probably one you already have at home, is a blindfold and earbud. So maybe if you use a sleep mask, you can use that too. But using those things just really enhances other sensations. But with the earbuds, you can also play, different music. You can have hardcore music or soft music, and you can even switch between the two. And then you can use things like leather belts, silk scarves, wooden spoons even. There's just so many options. So think about what's in your house right now that could add a little extra excitement to your next scene. You probably have something laying around, but of course, be safe, but really think out of the box here. So that was my third tip, to use everyday items for sensory play. And then tip number 4 is another overlooked sensation play kink, and that is the power of breath and voice. Because so many people focus on touch, but your breath and your voice can be just as powerful. Because maybe you've had someone whisper in your ear, and then suddenly your whole body is just full of goosebumps and tingles, and the hair on your arms is just standing up. But that is the power that our voice and our breath can have. So some ways to use breath and voice in your play is to have controlled breath. So really exhaling that warm air near the skin, or, pursing your lips and making your breath cool, but you can even contrast the two. So if you're maybe playing with something like ice cubes, then you can exhale your warm breath onto the skin so you experience that contrast. And then another thing you can do is lower your voice to a whisper. Instead of, being commanding and loud, just really, taking it down to that whisper. It can really just send shivers down your partner's spine. And then have vocal anticipation. So what this means is saying things like, I'm going to touch you, but not yet. And just using that to, build that anticipation can just be a lot of fun. Because a lot of times during a scene, my dom will just lean in and whisper to me, don't move. And, he's not touching me, there's no impact, but just his voice, it always just puts me in a puddle. And words are just such a huge overlooked sensation. So really use your voice intentionally. But this is why spicy audio content is becoming so huge right now. People are just really discovering the power of this type of breathy talking. So, ask yourself, how often do you actually use your voice in play? Maybe try doing something like whispering the next time and see how much more intense everything feels. But I will often hear people say, well, I don't know what to say and I don't want to sound corny and cheesy. Well, if you're a member of our All Access Pass, we have a whole speech workbook and speech template for DOMs and subs there, and sample phrases too. But one thing you can do is just talk about what you're going to do. You can talk about what you are doing in that moment. So kind of just narrating what you're doing, or, talk about what you just did. So you don't have to just come up with new things. You can talk about what you see too. So you can say things like, you look so good, completely vulnerable like this, and whimpering before me. So just kind of think of yourself as a narrator. So that was tip number 4, the power of breath and voice. So that brings us to tip number 5, and this is one I think just is the icing on the cake and is just such a pro move, but it's the role of deprivation and how less can be more. And this always makes me think of the story of Coco Chanel. So, if you don't know who she is, she was a French fashion designer and she just really revolutionized women's fashion in the 20th century. She's really best known for the LBD or the little black dress because she just made everything so simple and elegant, and especially with black dresses and just making it the timeless wardrobe staple that it is now. But she was really into minimalist fashion, and she had this one golden rule that before you leave the house, to always look in the mirror and take one thing off. So if you had maybe earrings on and a necklace and maybe a barrette in your hair, then you would take one thing off. Because to her, great style wasn't about just adding more, it was about removing distractions. So what remained was just really striking and elegant and intentional. And the same idea applies to sensation play because we often think more is better in terms of BDSM and kink, especially our scenes. We keep doing more touch, more stimulation, more intensity. And I see it all the time when people have a sensation scene. They think they have to cover all 5 senses. So they'll have ice cubes for temperature play. They'll have every implement imaginable for pain. They have colored light bulbs in their room for mood lighting. They play music. They have intense smells, even, candles and incense. And they just, for some reason have the whipped cream there too to make sure they cover taste. But sometimes the most powerful experiences come from taking something away. So when you remove sight, when you remove sound, or even movement, even, what's left really becomes so much sharper. So a single touch can just really feel electric. A whisper becomes a full body experience. So the absence of one sense makes every other sensation just really explode. And that's because when you limit one sense, the others go into overdrive. That's why blindfolds, earplugs, and restraints are so powerful. And I would even argue that people in general right now are super overstimulated anyway. They're constantly on their phones. I mean, I'm guilty too. We, have to live in cities too and deal with traffic. And a lot of people are neurodivergent, and sometimes having too much sensation play is a bad thing. So some ways to integrate, deprivation play into your scenes is to have things like blindfolds or hoods, because when you can't see, then everything you're feeling and touching is just so much more intense. And you can use something like noise canceling headphones. I have the Apple AirPods that are noise canceling, and it just really eliminates distractions and it just really amplifies all of my body sensations too. One time, my Dom put on the noise canceling headphones on me and he played heartbeat sounds in my ears while blindfolding me. And that way I can only focus on my body and his touch, but just having that slow, rhythmic heartbeat in my ears, it just really turned the entire experience into something really primal, too. So that's a way to play with primal play. And then another way to use sensory deprivation is to use gentle restraints. So this really stops the body from reacting and it just really forces full focus on the sensation. And it can be really comforting too. It's the whole reason why we swaddle babies and we have weighted blankets now. So just having that gentle restraint can just really take away any unnecessary movement. So we just have to concentrate and be present and mindful. But there you have it. Those are the 5 simple but game-changing ways to make sensation play unforgettable. Just some small tweaks like these can make a huge difference. And remember, if you want to see what a real sensation play scene looks like step by step, go to domsubliving.com/scene. I've put together an actual real life scene that you can read and use as inspiration in your own play. And again, you can grab it for free at domsubliving.com/scene. I'll have a link for it in the description too. But now I want to hear from you. So what's your favorite sensation play hack? Drop it in the comments so we can all learn from each other. And if you found this episode helpful, be sure to subscribe for more BDSM and kink tips every week. And until next time, keep embracing your power and pleasure through Dom Sub Living.